Your superhero talk show. I'm Brad West, your host. And of course, joining me today are my co-host, Mr. Greg Burrow from Dragons Are Comics and Fantasy here in West Anderson, here in Austin, Texas. Make sure you check them out. And then, of course, Miss Anastasia Anderson. She's going to put out the Googles and correct us if we get anything wrong, but we study for you. And then our special guest today is my good friend, Mr. Frank Wee, who is like one of my favorite comic book historians. He's very knowledgeable in everything and can draw parallels that I couldn't even
code for old.
Code for old. No, just very smart and revered, okay? We revere the elderly. No. So anyway.
Oh, man. You're lucky I can let that go for ethnic reasons.
Right.
Oh.
So anyway, we are going to be talking about altered states of being. Maybe a world where Frank didn't let that go. I don't know. This week's episode is about things that are different from the norm. Now, a lot of movies and TVs, especially superhero stuff, is getting really, really big into this right now, and there's a long history of it. And one of our main things that we're going to do is we're going to explore the different types of altered worlds. There's altered reality, there's alternate timelines, and then there's alternate dimensions. Now those easily get misconstrued by writers and sci-fi creators and stuff like that. However, there are some distinct differences that really will affect the storytelling going forward in some of these things. And as we move into this new era of the multiverse in Marvel, as well as, of course, DC doing the Flashpoint movie, and already having explored the Crisis on Infinite Earths on the TV shows, then it's really cool. I think it's really important for us all to kind of learn a little bit more about that and see how well our creators and going forward actually present those. The three we're talking about, like I said, is different realities. Different realities are a little bit different. They're mostly where it's the what if. The what if scenario.
Which I think if you've seen the new Marvel series,
What If,
the first one is absolutely brilliant, and I absolutely loved it.
And it straight up is a alternate reality. What if something else happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's what's known as a contrafactual, where you will go this way instead of that way, and how that can kind of
We'll get into that a little
change
bit.
everything.
Yeah.
Right. The second part is going to be about alternate timelines. That usually is based on a choice. Something changes something. It's like when you go back in time and you change something, you create the branch. And then finally is alternate dimensions, which coexist congruently with the current world. So there could also be alternate timeline dimensions and parallel reality dimensions. So that's kind of, it could get confusing, but we'll keep it as simple as we can.
Right.
So, all right, so let's start off with parallel reality. Parallel reality, also known as a multiverse. Now, a true multiverse is where a fundamental thing is different. It's the whole what if. So, for instance, if you've ever seen the TV show Sliders, each world that they go to is a parallel reality. Like there's the world where instead of Homo sapiens evolving to the dominant species, the Cro-Magnons evolve. Or there's a world where instead of the basic rules of reality being physics, they go to one where the basic rules of reality are essentially magic instead. So in comics, tell us what some of the original versions. I think the very first appearance would be in DC, right?
DC Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, Earth 4.
When they first did that, you have the Flash basically when you go to an alternate parallel reality, euphemistically it's been known as going sideways in time. Because you're going this way, you're not going forwards or backwards.
Yeah.
And so that's when the Flash, the modern day Flash, met a different Flash who became the Flash during World War II. And that was DC's way of resolving the fact that the Flash originally was created in World War II and then got changed. And so they're in two different Earths. So the heroes from World War II are different from the ones in the current reality.
So basically the what if tenet here is that what if the superheroes were originally created in World War II, or what if they were only now, and they both got to meet each other?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and this, a big thing that's going to screw everything up here for you guys is going to be the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Up until the Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comic book, in which case it was retcon, retroactive continuity, for those of you who are not in the know, to where they both existed at the same time. So it was no longer a what if, it was and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
And back in before 1986, there was theoretically 1,000 hands
Yes.
Yeah.
in the DC world.
And the cool thing about
And
it,
Marvel has, of course, 616,
Yes.
and which is the main continuity of the Marvel comics, and then there's a whole bunch of other
Yes.
Earths.
and then there's 1601, which is the Ultimate Universe, where Miles
Yes.
Morales was.
And then you also had the reality where the Squadron Supreme had existed,
yes, they were from another reality.
and where the entity known as the Circling Crown actually conquered the United States, and they were trying to come over to our Earth to conquer.
Now, one thing that I always found really amusing, this is like another little cute catchphrase from back in the day in the history of comic books. Before they established the hardcore concept of the multiverse, comics, especially DC comics, and I find this amusing, would refer to them as imaginary stories, which is kind of redundant considering that they're imaginary stories to begin with. But back before they really started the whole multiverse thing, they would do weird things with Superman and
Yes.
and it ultimately was a what if.
Yeah.
Another really good what if that I liked from DC was what they called Elseworlds.
Yes.
Elseworlds are really cool.
Oh.
That's where we get a lot of the good animated stuff from now. Like, what if Superman landed in Cold War Russia instead of America? And that's where we get, the Red Sun Superman.
Okay.
Those are Elseworlds was DC's
Gotham
version
by
of
Gaslight.
What if?
Yes.
Gotham by Gaslight. What if
Yes.
Bruce Wayne was around at the time of Jack the Ripper?
Yes,
Those
like and the what ifs was Marvel's way of playing into those alternate
And Marvel
realities.
has a lot of fun with it. There was
Yes.
actually the one what if where it was like, what if the Marvel bullpen was the Fantastic
Yes,
Four?
and so
Which
you
is
had
hilarious.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby
as the
being
thing.
there, and that was they started doing that playing with that idea in the 70s, and you had the character the Watcher, whose job was to look at parallel Earths anyway.
Yeah.
Was the narrator. He was basically Rod Serling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they even, and sometimes it was down to just diverging in one way. Probably the boldest thing they did in the original version is where they had technology. People listened to people like Leonardo and went off on their technology. So by the time World War II came along, it was being fought in space against aliens, and Nick Fury is in space, and his Howling Commandos are in spacesuits with laser beams.
Oh.
And
That's cool.
And it's hilarious actually, but it's quite fun.
Well, there's also some really awesome ones, like what if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four in
Yes.
Maybe
What if
Spider-Man-
somebody else got bitten? Kind
Yes.
of.
Yeah.
Or yes.
Yeah.
Or in that case, it was 3 other people. What if? So it was actually 3 alternate realities.
So-
And
Yeah.
one of my favorites was actually before the current Jane Foster Thor run.
Where
what
Gordon-
if
Jane Foster got it.
picked up the cane
Hammer's
before
dead.
And she earned
Donald
it,
Blake.
and instead of a cane, she had a hairbrush. She
And
carved
that-
it into a hairbrush,
oh,
and
hairbrush.
boom, so it fit in her handbag.
That's actually
Cute.
practical. You don't have to punch it in your having that.
But of
But then
course-
she ended up with Odin at the end.
Oh, it's a little sketchy.
Oh.
Ultimately, now Spider-Verse is obviously my favorite alternate or parallel realities.
Yes.
Because Spider-Verse, just like I said, Miles Morales came from parallel reality.
Uh-huh.
Gwen Stacy was a parallel reality. What if she got bit by it instead in a more modern
And
time?
you had that movie has all the other variations.
And yes.
Middle-aged Peter Parker, Japanese Spider-Person.
Yes,
so
those
forth.
Well, of
alternate
course, there were
realities.
elements that I absolutely hated about Spider-Verse, but there were also things that I loved about Spider-Verse. I hated that they killed the Spider-Man from the Amazing, Spider-Man.
Oh yes, I know, which is my favorite. obviously.
But the whole
tasty.
point is that was taking the idea of parallel realities to the, pardon the pun, the nth degree.
Right. Right.
So
Now here's a really major important thing going forward for y'all to remember that will really maybe, I'm hoping, help you to distinguish the difference between a parallel reality and an alternate timeline. Parallel realities, short of apocalypses, continue on. Okay, so Peter, the animated characters of Spider-Ham, he goes back to his world. His
Yeah.
world is still there. They do their own thing. They're running in tandem parallel.
Yeah, they're just continuing on this way, even if occasionally they...
Even if occasionally cross.
Yeah.
Now, in tomorrow's episode, we're going to tell you about alternate timelines and alternate timelines are not so lucky. Their time is limited. They run the risk of being erased or eradicated altogether, and that's what really makes the true juicy difference. So we thank you. Is there anything else you want to throw in there for the parallel timelines?
Well.
There's a lot of really good sci-fi that has it.
There is. There's a lot of good sci-fi, but since we're sticking to comics, they've made What If into an animated series, which I'm sure as you're seeing this you are aware of.
Yes.
And one of the more upcoming, or it'll have aired by now.
Yes.
Is a very special one.
The T'Challa one. So.
With What If Prince T'Challa had become Star-Lord instead of Peter Quill?
So yeah.
Right?
So, in other words, we have a noble Star-Lord instead of a douchey one.
Yes.
Well, also, isn't this the last Chadwick Boseman?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is his official last performance.
Yes.
And yeah, they didn't get all the original voice actors back, but they did get some choice ones, and this is one that we're all looking forward to seeing if we haven't already, because I don't know what's here.
I mean, the Peggy Carter one was absolutely amazing.
Absolutely right.
I
I
enjoyed
loved
it.
it.
It's like, and yeah, if you did it, it's like, and if you want to find these, we just went to Free Comic Book Day, and there was a version of What If in every single store.
Every
so,
store had some of the
pop
what ifs.
by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're fun.
And the thing about it is that the nice thing about the what if or elsewhere scenarios, it allows a lot of freedom. And the Ultimates universe was created to allow that kind of freedom to create new realities, and whether and personal taste aside, it's a good idea.
But if you've played the Injustice Gods Among Us, that's a What If video game.
Yep.
If you are going into your local comic book shop, make sure you're looking for obviously the What If comic books, but also the Elseworlds comic books.
They also collected the What If stories into
They have
omnibus
collection.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Edge of Spider-Verse is one that's a What If collection. You can find that out there.
And on television, like the Arrowverse shows from the past years, like The Flash, are very heavy into parallel worlds, or up to 52, I think. And but like they did a magnificent crossover.
Grant Morrison did a book called Multiversity, which is super cool.
Yeah, like I said,
Read it. It's got literally
the CW
explains all 52 different ones.
I'm saying the CW show about five years back did this terrific crossover of parallel Earth that crossed 4 of their shows, and that was Crisis on Earth X.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
It's fun.
It's fun. That is worth pursuing.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today on the Red Web. Tomorrow we're going to talk about alternate timelines. That's a lot more sci-fi-y, believe it or not, and it definitely is going to be a little bit harder to track. So make sure you join us tomorrow. Thank you for coming. Like, subscribe. We are here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch.
Yes.
Very cool. And remember, RadTripWeb.com. Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.